welcome back to another video. Today's date is March 20th, 2026, and as you can see, I am on the highway. Time check is 7:55 a.m., and I'm on my way to the Iron Triangle Rail Park in Fostoria, Ohio. This is my first trip up here as a one-man show, and I'm really looking forward to what I might see past the rail park today. I am just south of Upper Sandusky, so I still got a little ways to go. So I'll go ahead and get back to you guys once I get there. Alrighty folks, I'm not currently at Fostoria yet. I decided to stop at the National Lime and Stone Company over here in Cary to check out the wheeling in Lake Erie. And look what we got sitting in here. Got a quartet of 40s, including a blue one. And then we also got the 711 or the 712 stone job that just came in. So I'm going to go ahead and snap some pictures here real quick and then make my way over to Fostoria. As shown in the previous scene, a quartet of SD40-2s were sitting alongside the crop fields alongside the quarry. I'd say that it's a step up from the previous time I was here, as you have the 7006 in its CEFX colors. You got the 6354 that's a movie celebrity, especially amongst people who watched Unstoppable copious amounts of times. And you also got one of the 30th anniversary units in this consist as well. As I was taking pictures of the quartet of SD40s sitting by the crop fields, the other trio of SD40s on point of the 711 job would start moving as they would enter the yard. Wheeling in Lake Erie Train 711 is an as-needed stone job that operates between Bertain Rail Yard and Akron, Ohio for the National Lime and Stone Company here in Cary, Ohio. He's going behind the cuts of cars here, so we won't be able to see this cut. You still got the blue one here, so I'm going to go ahead and snap pictures of that. As per typical, for the last couple of times I have seen regionals and Shortlines, whenever I see them in action for the first time, the footage that I would get would unfortunately not be the best. Attempting to get some pictures of the locomotives leading the 711 job, we find wheeling in Lake Erie SD40-2, 7001, 7010, and 7024. All three of these locomotives having a pretty colorful work history, in addition to the quartet that we saw earlier. The bookend locomotives to this consist are also trackable on heritage units, as 7001 has Operation Lifesaver stickers, and 7024 has the railroad's very own 35th anniversary stickers. As I was making my way out of Cary, I noticed 711's locomotives would reach a spot alongside the plant that was more accessible. Considering I didn't know where the property lines were for this industry, this was as close as I was willing to get. Alrighty folks, I have just pulled in after watching the Wheeling and Lake Erie 7-Eleven job pull in at Cary, and the particular reason why I'm not over at the pavilion over there is because we actually actively got a train coming on the Willard subdivision. So let's go ahead and get it, and let's get started with the day. The eastbound that was actively approaching on CSX's Willard subdivision was CSX I-162, just 14 miles into its daily journey between North Baltimore, Ohio and Port Newark, New Jersey. I was shown rather quickly that I needed to keep my head on a swivel because after I-162 cleared the interlocking, westbound intermodal I-169 practically fell out of the sky on the Willard subdivision on its daily journey between Port Newark, New Jersey and Chicago, Illinois. I unfortunately didn't have a good start to the day because after I-169 cleared the F-Tower interlocking, a northbound would appear on the Columbus subdivision, taking the southeast wide to finish its daily journey between Columbus, Ohio and Willard, Ohio with CSX local freight L340. Considering that it's well covered behind the tree line, we won't see much of L340. Once I got my head screwed on tight, a southbound would appear on CSX's Pemberville subdivision. Preparing to take the Northwest Y from south to west, from the Pemberville subdivision to the Willard subdivision, was CSX M567, a daily job that operates between Walbridge, Ohio and Gibson, Indiana, with mixed freight traffic for the Indiana Harbor Belt. Another westbound was next in line on the Willard subdivision, being another mixed freight train, CSX M561, on its daily journey between Selkirk, New York and Cincinnati, Ohio. At roughly the same time, one of the more interesting trains that was in the area would then make its way through eastbound on the Willard subdivision, CSX Mixed Freight M558, on its daily journey between Cincinnati, Ohio and Willard, Ohio. One SD70 Mac is all that's needed to get this train to its destination. Finally, Norfolk Southern stepped onto the plate when an eastbound would appear on the Fostoria district. I unfortunately didn't get the symbol of this train, but what made it unique was the oversized load that was tucked in right behind the locomotives. Practically spawning in, but giving me enough time to prep my tripod, a westbound would appear on the Fostoria district, which came in the form of NS Intermodal 259, on its daily journey between Rutherford, Pennsylvania and Kansas City, Missouri. Not wanting to interrupt an EMD Notch 8 showcase, around 12:15, it was around that time that this train would begin its daily work. NS Local Freight L70, which runs on a round trip between Blair Yard and Fostoria, Ohio, and Lipsick, Ohio, with steel coil cars and a nice power set, which included an ex-Conrail SD40-2 and an old friend trailing second, NS GP38-2 High Hood 5036. Control of the interlocking was given back to CSX when eastbound crude oil train B119 showed up on the Willard subdivision on its as-needed journey off the BNSF interchange in Cicero, Illinois for Eddystone, Pennsylvania, with a pair of BNSF pumpkins in charge today. Later, one of the most sophisticated trains that comes through Fostoria would then make its way through east on the Willard subdivision. CSX Intermodal IO10 on a mad dash between Chicago, Illinois and North Bergen, New Jersey, with its load of UPS trailers and other international and domestic shippers. If you keep this train on its allotted schedule, you'll be printing money for CSX, and if you make it late, well, you'll be kissing your career on the railroad goodbye. Getting a shot from the caboose this time, and with a YN2 AC-44 trailing second, another mixed freight train would make its way through eastbound on the Willard subdivision. This one in particular was CSX M370, which runs on a daily basis from Chicago, Illinois for Cumberland, Maryland. It was clear I was getting a little too comfortable at this particular point, as I thought that this northbound coming up the Columbus subdivision would take the southeast wide to go eastward on the Willard subdivision. This one in particular would go straight north on the Columbus subdivision to the Pemberville subdivision. While being your typical mysterious northbound empty grain train with a pair of Gevos pulling it, the trailing 5202 was pretty shiny, as evident from a recent repaint into the company's current livery. locomotives would make their way past F Tower a little while later on the Willard subdivision, this one in particular being one of the few bulk commodity trains that run on a daily basis, CSX B157, which runs between the U.S. Steel Mill in Clarendon, Pennsylvania, back to the Gary, Indiana interchange to the Canadian National. Unfortunately, this next train, which was among one of the other interesting movements through the area, could only be documented off of photos from my DSLR camera. Right after the B157 made its way through the interlocking heading westbound, eastbound intermodal train I-166 was next, on its daily journey off of the CPKC interchange in Bensenville, Illinois, for Quebec, Canada. I-166 today had a Canadian National leader and a Canadian Pacific mid-train DPU. The reason why you're not seeing the video for this train was because it was rendered unusable when the wind decided to knock over my tripod which had my phone on it, so I apologize that this is the only way you're seeing this train, but having these pictures is better than having nothing at all. After that disaster with the I-166, I would find myself running to the Willard subdivision side of the park once again when another westbound intermodal train approached on the Willard subdivision. I unfortunately didn't get the symbol of this train either. card at the end of the previous scene belonged to the final train I would see at the rail park today. Getting a nice going away shot of it here, taking the Northwest Y from the Willard subdivision to the Pemberville subdivision from east to north on its daily journey between North Baltimore, Ohio and Detroit, Michigan was CSX Intermodal I-150, and a very short one at that. Alrighty folks, I just left Fostoria, and you might be wondering, what are you doing back at the National Lime and Stone Company? Well, I wanted to see if the quartet of 40s I saw earlier were still here, but it turns out only one of the 40s is still here, and it's unfortunately not the one that I would like to see, so I'm going to go ahead and snap some pictures. It also looks like somebody suffered a slight oopsie doing some switching while I was away, so I'll go ahead and get back to you guys if I stop anywhere else, and if not, well, leave a like or a comment down below to share your thoughts on the video. And if you really enjoy my videos, consider subscribing to the channel and tapping the bell button to be notified when a new one gets posted. Alrighty folks, this is the final stop that I'm going to make during my trip. There's supposedly a Santa Fe GP30 that works this industry, but it's not in a spot where it's visible off public property, and I'm not willing to take any risks. But there is an SW1500 that's sitting right here that's pretty cool. And this is basically the true ending of this trip. I already did all the algorithm stuff in the previous scene, so take care.